Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, April 20th, 2017. Does anybody know what's going on? If you do, please call. You can do a radio show and let me know. I have, luckily this morning being Thursday, I do have Greg Dworkin to lean on today. And of course, he's got his raft of stories ready. I'm just a little bit late to the keyboard today. Small change in schedule. No big deal. I just don't know what's happening. So you tell me. I don't know. Has there been, I've missed it if there have been morning rage tweets from the president. I don't think so. I think it's being Thursday, he's looking forward to starting his weekend, though I'm not certain I'm clear on where he's going this weekend. I guess we might as well bet on which Trump properties he'll be visiting. I think what I've been reading is he's nearly done. He's going to wrap up on the Mar-a-Lago season. I didn't realize there was a Mar-a-Lago season, but apparently they shut down more or less during the summer months, and I guess that makes a certain amount of sense being down in Florida. Not as much interest in traveling to South Florida in the heat of summer. So it's a winter resort for him, and I guess that's why he's been calling it the Winter White House all this time. Word is that he will now begin imposing himself and the burden of his entourage, and I guess also shepherding world leaders to Bedminster, New Jersey, that capital, the second capital of the United States, really. It's been referred to many times during American history. Bedminster, New Jersey, the site of one of his many East Coast golf clubs. He won't be... I don't know whether he's headed there this weekend, but they're already getting nervous about what that means up there and how much money they're going to have to spend locally on additional security. West Palm Beach has been more or less crushed under the burden of having to deal with his continued presence. And the Bedminster tax base just not quite as large. Wealthy people there, to be sure, but fewer of them. And I guess fewer mega millionaires, as you might find in the Palm Beach area. Anyway, no word on whether he's going to be there this weekend so far, at least not last night. Maybe that has changed this morning. We could be in for another visit from him locally at the golf course. We'll check it out. We'll find out what's going on, and we'll catch up on a number of other important stories for the day. Just sort of taking a look around now. And trying to see how a day will shape up. There's an awful lot to catch up on, and we could round up our headlines. I'll leave Greg's headlines for him to round up because, he spent so much time rounding them up at this point. It'd be a shame to spoil all the fun for him before he gets here, although some of our headlines may yet match. Let's see. This morning I pick up on the Business Insider piece entitled, and this really tells all the story that needs to be told, not a single U.S. attorney position has been filled since Sessions and Trump cleaned house last month. That house, of course, would have been the U.S. Attorney's Office, but you never say you clean office. People just don't refer to it that way. Michelle Mark, writing for Business Insider. Like I said, there's not much more to it than that. There's detail in here to be sure, but more than a month after Attorney General Jeff Sessions directed dozens of the country's top federal prosecutors to immediately resign. Now remember, that was the instruction. Immediately resign. Just out of here now. We'll replace you later. Not one of the 93 U.S. attorney positions has been filled. And you begin to wonder whether it's by design or whether they realize, no, we're not going to be able to get any of our nominees through anyway. I did see yesterday that Chris Geidner, who follows this subject pretty closely, was noting the scheduling of some hearings for, at least one judicial nominee for the Sixth Circuit being called for in the Judiciary Committee. But just to keep you up to date on the mechanics of these things, most of these people for whom they are beginning to schedule hearings have still not actually been nominated. The White House page where they keep track of presidential communications to Congress, etc., and the corresponding page at congress.gov is filled with announcements, press releases announcing the president's intention to nominate someone to office, and the drawer with the actual nominations in it is empty. He's just not sending the paperwork, and he loves to sign things, so you begin to wonder what the holdup is. They can, of course, hold hearings without having an official paper with the nomination on it, but they can't hold a vote. It usually arrives just before they get ready to move the vote to the floor, but it's a curious method of approaching these things, and I guess put it in the file with this is a disorganized administration that has no idea what it's doing and hasn't hired anyone or carried anyone over from the previous administration who understands the brass tacks of governance, and maybe they just don't care. Anyway, Greg Dworkin is here with us, and he's got a number of stories about which he does care. They're all lined up for me here. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. So why would you do brass tacks if you could do it gold-plated?
Oh, well, maybe that's it. Maybe he's afraid of the word tax. That could be it.
That could be it. Because it sounds like you're going to have to release your tax.
Brass tacks.
I have a whole box of tax here, and I have to release them.
I want to sell off my position in brass, I guess. It's a brass tax.
You know, it reminds me of an old, where was it? I think it was Duck Soup.
Oh, it's all Duck Soup for you.
Right? Where Groucho was president of somewhere, Fredonia maybe.
Yeah.
And he was arguing with his cabinet because he wanted to refurbish his office, and they wanted to talk about policy.
Ah, that does sound familiar.
And Groucho said, we need a new carpet. And his Minister of Finance says, I insist that we take up the tax. And Groucho said, that's true. You got to take up the tax before you can take up the carpet. So, it's all part of the same thing. and Donald Trump, I think one of the things that just strikes me, and I have this piece here as part of the lineup here. Aaron Blake was talking in the Fix. The Fix has gotten a whole lot better lately. I don't know if you've noticed.
I wonder why might that have happened?
Because Solis not there, and now he's at CNN doing dumb things. So Aaron Blake is looking at Jason Chaffetz and Devin Nunes.
Yes.
Nunes.
Why not?
Morning, noons, and night. Jason Chaffetz and Devin Nunes were both faced with investigating Trump, and now both are stepping aside, and points out the ludicrousness of the reality that any Republican who's actually charged with doing their job is in a pickle, is in a tough place.
Yeah.
Because you can't do your job and protect the president and the Republican Party at the same time. So one of them had to step aside, and the other flat out just had to retire,
yeah.
which is still unclear in terms of why. In fact, I didn't see the article, but I read that on Politico, there was this whole thing between Chaffetz and Paul Ryan, where Ryan said, something along the lines of, I don't really approve of you stepping down. And Chaffetz said, I'm not calling to get permission. I'm calling to inform you.
Well, that's his prerogative.
Right? So a lot of this is still a head scratcher in terms of exactly what happened and why it happened.
Yeah, I had heard some rumors that maybe he was just considering running for
governor
higher
in
office,
2020, but he still didn't have to do it now.
No, but I appreciate that he did.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see
in any case, as Aaron Blake describes this, he says, it's one thing to shrug off clearly partisan efforts to get you to investigate a president.
Yes.
And most presidents are careful to avoid doing the kinds of things that put you in that position. But Trump has no such compunction. He's not afraid to saddle you with investigating his wild evidence-free claims, and not only that, he'll gladly take you on publicly if you run afoul of him. And this is the part that got me annoyed. For Chaffetz and Nunes, that leads to decisions between giving in to extraordinary, and then Aaron Blake adds, for reasons I cannot fathom, and in many cases legitimate, public pressure to investigate Trump and doing what your president and party want you to. Nunes erred way too much toward the latter and paid the price. You can bet an ambitious and smart politician like Chaffetz knows this whole thing is a lose-lose situation for him. And even people in Utah were saying that the person that was probably hurt most by the election of Donald Trump was Chaffetz.
Oh?
Because, he had a whole path to glory, which was going to be investigating Clinton forever. And it was just snatched out from under him, and then he didn't know what to do because, he didn't have a plan B.
Well, it wasn't much of a plan A.
I know, but he had no plan B.
Right. Well,
in any case, why would Aaron Blake say that decisions between giving in to extraordinary and in many cases legitimate public pressure to investigate Trump? What do you mean in many cases legitimate? What parts of investigating Trump so far have not been legitimate? I don't understand what the reference is. And I read this and said, why are these guys continuing to try to normalize him?
I don't know.
He is incapable. He's emotionally incapable and intellectually incapable of doing the job and doesn't belong there. Right. And they keep defending him, and the courtiers keep pretending that, nothing's wrong. And we've had precedent for this. When Reagan had Alzheimer's, they did the same thing. They think they can get away with anything as long as, they keep up the pretense because they know the reporters won't dare to write the truth.
Yes. Well, with Reagan, I guess if you put up, 5-6 years of relative normalcy, it's a lot easier to
it was only the
drag
last
yourself
couple of years,
across
the last year or
line.
so, but still.
Right, you come in as a...
how did people not know, and why didn't they write about it?
I don't know. There were still people there who were finishing out their careers who, came in with the Kennedys. And, I covered things up all the time. That's what I do.
Yeah. But now, this is 2017.
Yes.
What's going on here?
The Internet. I don't know. I wonder whether... I'd be curious to know what he thinks he was doing. I guess it's easy enough if you want to. If you're interested in dismissing it as a throwaway line, all right, well, I'm going to say most cases it's mushy enough that no one will really be on solid ground attacking me one way or the other. I'm like, it's legitimate, but in case you were going to attack me from the right, I'll just say mostly legitimate. And then maybe...
Yeah, in case you were going to attack me from the right is exactly the point here.
Yeah.
Stop being so afraid and do what you're supposed to. There's another aspect to this. Nate Silver had a couple of tweets. I stuck this at the bottom of the pundit roundup yesterday. Just a couple, but a couple as in two. It's telling that there's been, quote, some, end quote, media self-reflection on how it covered Trump, but really none at all on how it covered Clinton. If you want to detect what the media's biggest blind spots were in 2016, look to the things it still doesn't acknowledge were blind spots.
A lot of that.
And he's talking about Hillary Clinton coverage. I'm saying that one of the other blind spots here is they can't acknowledge their compulsion to normalize whoever's in the White House no matter what. And you have to step back and wonder and say, look, what exactly happened here? What happened between Watergate and now that we have this kind of nonsense?
I don't know.
Would you have said that about Watergate? That there's mostly legitimate, things to be asking about here?
At the time, probably. Now, I guess, looking in hindsight, we tend to be absolutist about it. But the Democratic investigators and those are the authors of impeachment resolutions dismissed an awful lot of what they had legitimately investigated. In the end, when they were finally threatening, okay, well, you're not taking the hint, we will go ahead with impeachment votes, but we're going to drop the, Cambodia bombing ones and all of these other things and just focus on the Watergate break-in. And, people make those weird accommodations.
They do, and they are weird. Jay Rosen had a really intriguing tweet set last night, not that long, about 5 or 6 things. He says, he's sharing some key slides from my talk at NYU last night about the predicament of the American press after Trump's election. And for example, one slide he has, decades ago, the press took a wrong turn by focusing on the game of politics and connecting to voters through the knowledge insiders had about how to win. What he calls the Church of the Savvy. And Chris Cillizza was like the leading priest there. It doesn't really matter whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't really matter whether it's competent or incompetent. It doesn't really matter whether it's a lie or the truth. What really matters is, did it work? That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
It's the epitome in the press of Trump's attitude that you don't get to ask me about my taxes or anything else about me because I won. Therefore, making all inquiries about me or myself or anything I'm doing, including collusion with the Russians or perhaps ethics and conflicts of interest. None of those are legitimate questions because I won.
Oh, yes. Well, he does think that.
Yeah, he does. And it's a weird thing. So another slide Jay Rosen has. Slides in my talking and while you continued.
Okay.
And then 1/5 to 1/3 of the voters are increasingly lost to the national press. Theirs is an information sphere distinct from mainstream journalism. These are the people who watch Bill O'Reilly, except they can't anymore because he's not in the air.
Right, yes. Right.
A case for academics, the people with PhDs and summers off to do research have, I think, failed. We don't know why this is happening. And then he writes, for reasons not well understood, reality seems to have become a weaker constraint in the political sphere of Western democracies. He's talking about the rise of fake news. Many things Trump does are best explained by narcissistic personality disorder, but by their own code and fairness bias, journalists are reluctant to talk that way.
Yes. Which
is true. He says, with Trump in power, there's a surplus of eventfulness. He keeps everybody in a constant state of alarm, too much news. The pace is itself a kind of propaganda. Too many things to cover, so you can't cover any one thing the way it ought to.
I'll agree.
Just do our job is the nearly unanimous sentiment in newsrooms about how to respond. But what if the job has changed? Jay Rosen asks uncomfortable things. So things the press has been doing pretty well. Beefing up White House coverage with more people, defending normal levels of access. So the secrecy and not knowing what the logs are to visit Mar-a-Lago and stuff like that turn out to be big deals for the media, just like Hillary Clinton did or didn't give a press conference, and so they were counting the days was a big deal for them. That's among the normal stuff that they do. Cultivating anonymous sources in the executive branch and digging deeply into the Russia connection. They're doing very well there. Now here's other things they're doing pretty well. Depicting palace intrigue and internal turmoil, tracking campaign promises versus reality, reporting on conflicts of interest, Trump family business ties, handling Trump's Twitter feed and TV watching habits. And, here's another they've done okay. Getting rapidly up to the speed of encryption and operational security, calling lies and falsehoods by the right names, fighting Trump's distortions with newly feisty PR departments, and appealing to core audiences for financial support. So far, media is doing okay on those things. But, it still leaves a lot here in terms of the normalization. And so it's good to credit them with things that they have done well. That's all good. But, it still doesn't excuse and get away from when you just normalize things.
Yeah. Well, it's an enormous problem of just trying to figure out the language with which to handle him. And
it's true, but here's another way you see it. I mean, he's a crook, he's a liar, things he's saying aren't true, it's not working. Oh, look, he dropped the missile, isn't this wonderful? He's now and all of a sudden he's like decisive and all of this. And then he goes ahead and he lies about his armada. It's like he's playing with army men, the little green army men, and moving them around the board, or playing a game of Risk and cheating. And all of a sudden, it doesn't work so well. And you know who isn't really appreciative of it? The South Koreans and other people around the world who don't have to put up with the bullshit of the Washington press and the courtiers trying to make them normal.
Well, we've never had a really great tradition in our press of including world opinion or world coverage. For instance, I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the British model either. But I know that just historically, of course, because of the extent of the British Empire, they continue, I think, to still just get a great deal more input from around the world and correspondence around the world, and it makes a difference what the correspondents in Korea are telling the newsrooms in London, and we just don't have that here. We're just very focused on America, and we get the same amount of space in our newspapers. We just fill it with optics instead.
We do it, and that's what Jay Rosen was referring to. And it's interesting because when Trump and other people like Tillerson go overseas and you have the foreign correspondents asking them questions, they're much better questions. Oh, I can't believe they had they dared to ask that particular question. Well, you could. You have access. You could do that anytime you want to. Why didn't you ask that question?
You know what? Here's a good point. I don't know whether it's something we want to perpetuate the bad reporting necessarily, but a good point being made here via Twitter. Bosengood, who chimed in yesterday, High on the media fail list, no countdown clock for tax returns. I know the countdown clocks are kind of dumb and goofy, and we
Right, but
rather get
CNN
rid
is a
of it,
master at it. They might as well do it.
Yes, I mean, if the
Be the one thing
excuse is
CNN
we
did right.
can't-
The entire, Trump
if we can't move them off of
administration.
their model, well then fine, use the model this way. You love.
I think they should
countdown
make
clocks.
Jeffrey Lord announce it every day.
That's I don't know if he'll do that, but they might as well ask him, or put
He
him on
doesn't
the
do
spot.
anything else.
That's true. Whoever appears with him on a panel ought to ask. If nothing else, you can just say, before we get started, you have that.
Tucker Carlson could do it on Fox.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I understand he's getting Bill O'Reilly's time slot.
Which gives you an idea how weak the bench is.
Yes.
So here's
Find
a
out
piece
how-
by
who's
Amy
a smoke
Davidson
show now.
in the New Yorker to continue on this foreign policy thing.
All right.
Donald Trump, North Korea, and the case of the Phantom Armada.
Oh boy.
Look, we have ships headed there, President Donald J. Trump told the Wall Street Journal, recounting the straight talk he had handed to President Xi of China on the subject of North Korea. He says he knows it very well. I said, not only are there aircraft carriers, we have nuclear subs, which you have to let them know.
They know.
It's like he brought his little green army men to the table and was showing Xi how they work,
Look at this.
right? And Xi looked at him and said, I have that in terracotta, and they're a lot older, right? So,
Right. By the way, was this part of his plan for not projecting what he's doing, not telegraphing?
yeah, something along those lines.
Okay.
But then, of course, he made it sound like he had ordered the Vincent to sail north, Carl Vincent to sail north.
Yes.
And McMaster reiterated the news on the same day, framing it as a response to North Korea's own provocative moves. Of course, as we know now, it turned out that that wasn't the case, and they happened to be sailing somewhere around Indonesia on their way to Australia, or at least they're on their way to Australian war games, which had already been planned.
Yes.
And that had been part of the problem. Even if the Vincent had been where the White House said it was, the administration spoke about its mission in ways that were incoherent. The contradictions, the infighting, the muddling of motives, the diplomatic recklessness of the administration can be so distracting, it's possible to miss the fact that a fleet is in the wrong ocean.
Yeah.
So where did the triage begin, with the facts or the follies? So you have an incoherent, that is to say, nobody knows what the heck they're doing foreign policy to begin with. How does the New York Times handle it? Look at this headline from Glenn Thrush and Mark Land. They're not their fault because they don't write the headlines. Bold, unpredictable foreign policy lifts Trump but has risks. It's not bold. And not knowing what you're doing, there's other words besides unpredictable that you could put in there. And the courtiers here still can't get their arms and head and mind wrapped around the fact that Trump doesn't know what the hell he's doing and is totally unprepared to make decisions.
Unpredictable is the best thing you could say there.
Yes, and it makes it sound like it's a plus. It's not a plus. In fact, Mike Pence, is making news and out on the stump, doing odd things. For example, he was talking about Indonesia President Joko Widodo following bilateral meetings between the two leaders in Jakarta. Listen to what Mike Pence says. As the largest majority Muslim country, Indonesia's tradition of modern Islam, frankly, is the inspiration to the world. Okay, no problem with that. We commend you and your people in your nation, and then these three words, as in mine. Religion unifies. It doesn't divide. It gives us hope for a brighter future, and we're all grateful for the great inspiration that Indonesia provides for the world.
Yeah, I was going to say...
Which religion was he talking about?
Zoroastrianism.
I don't know. It's the blurring of the lines that the Constitution clearly sets out in terms of a separation of church and state are always at risk with Mike Pence.
Yeah.
But perhaps a more relevant part of foreign policy in terms of sticking your foot in it is Trump just offhandedly remarking that Korea was once part of China.
Yes. I did
Which
read that.
the Koreans don't accept and the Chinese insist.
Did the Chinese insist on that, or?
Well, I think he got that information from President Xi, who probably told him, because I don't think Trump would have known any other way. I don't think it was on Fox
News. Of that, although I did see that there was some question of whether President Xi said that, whether the translation might not have been great or whether that's just something Trump understood from something else that he actually said.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I guess that's true. He's supposed to know these things.
He's supposed to know these things, and he's supposed to not say them.
But it does make a difference
Koreans
whether
are
the
very
Chinese are
offended,
saying these things.
They're supposed to be our allies.
Yeah, I could see. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the Chinese to probably think, I guess culturally speaking, they probably think everything was a part of China at some point. But who knows?
The thing is that here's an article
Americans.
from Bloomberg just setting it out. See if it can do me a favor and actually load. According to the computer, it's waiting for an available socket. That sounds like painful. But the headline is South Korea tells Trump it actually has never been part of China.
Yes, well, the South Koreans would think so.
Yeah.
And even a little bit I read there, apparently South Korea has sort of been on its own for a while.
Right, and here is one from The Independent from Great Britain. Donald Trump accused of shocking ignorance after suggesting Korea used to be part of China.
Allegedly.
Ridiculous claim is nothing but a grave challenge to the identity of the Korean people, according to the Korean Junong Daily. I mean, these are like diplomatic incidents, as we used to call them.
Yes. Well, we knew instantly right after the election that he was not worried about diplomatic incidents. He's taking world leader phone calls on his private cell phone. The Taiwan situation, which turns out didn't alarm people in Taiwan as much as we thought. Although I guess it's time to check in with him again if he's given Korea away.
Well, but I'm just shaking my head at this. This is shockingly ignorant.
Yes. Well,
this is horrible. But it's okay because he dropped the bomb on Afghanistan, so now he's bold.
Well, you can solve a lot of problems with huge
what am I
bombs.
missing here?
I don't know. That was the most normal thing he had done. Believe it or not, it's unfortunate because it means
he killed dozens.
Yeah, well, that's what our presidents do. They run around killing dozens of people. They speak better of their records afterwards, but that's the only difference. I mean, people who get bombed, it's all the same.
Right. Here's one from the Washington Post. Trump's inartful retelling of Sino-Korean history sparked widespread outrage among Koreans who are particularly sensitive to the U.S. president's rhetoric amid heightened tensions between North and South. Mm-hmm. Leaders across the political spectrum criticized Trump's characterization, calling it a clear distortion of history, an attempt to undermine Korean sovereignty.
Yes.
Not good. Now, no. Trump's phrasing that the Korean peninsula actually used to be part of China may be his SparkNotes version, not a verbatim account of Xi's history lesson. The two spoke through interpreters. The White House did not respond to our request for clarification.
Nor will they.
But then they go over what's misleading about the Trump claim. It's just that, you don't want to be in a position where the President of the United States is perfectly capable, because he doesn't do his homework, of, sparking wars and international incidents and pissing off allies and doing things at a time when tensions are already high, because you don't want to get into a nuclear war because he heard something on Fox that he only half heard and then repeated and was wrong.
Yes.
And this guy's totally capable of doing something like that.
Yep. Well, pretty much.
Well, that's how you should cover him then.
Okay.
And don't talk about bold, unpredictable foreign policy and how it helps him in the frickin' polls. Because what happened? His poll number went up by a total of 2 points, from 38 to 40. That's it.
Oh, so then you can objectively say it made no difference.
It did make no difference. It made no difference.
Uh-huh.
It didn't make any difference, however you want to phrase it. And, to credit him, it's just absurd. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, I don't know. They're just trying to get from one day to the next. I mean, that's not a good answer, but I think that is the answer, but that's a terrible answer.
Well, the American people need to be informed, and one of the things they need to be informed about is that they have a dunderhead in the White House who doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Yes. Well, I don't know if Americans need to be informed. I've just been informed.
Let's pretend that Hillary Clinton had done it, and how would they handle it? Getting back to that original Nate Silver point.
Why not?
Talk about a blind spot with the press, and that's the reason why I'm focusing on this.
All right. Well, let's inform Americans. I don't know whether this
that's
is
what we do,
this
and that's why
morning
people listen to the show.
Or from yesterday, but I'm seeing this now circulating all over Twitter. In the Oval Office at the moment, or at some moment immediately prior, with the president are Ted Nugent, Kid Rock, Sarah Palin, and two women I assume to be attached to Nugent and And I don't know. They're unidentified, and I don't recognize them. They may be famous in their own right, but I think they might be their wives or girlfriends. But what a collection, and that's a lot of hats in there, too. And Sarah Palin, I like that they threw her in there for no particular reason. They're like, bring me the 3 dumbest high-profile supporters I've got. Okay. And here she is. I mean, Ted Nugent, Kid Rock musical. Sarah Palin, just, I don't know. But so there you have it. I mean, do we need to be informed? What's the difference? He's not informed. He's not going to get informed. Now I'm informed. I know that he's got idiots in his office. What do I do now?
Well, we know he associates with idiots. There's this great opinion page piece here from the New York Times from yesterday. I love the title and I love the authors. It says, "Why are Republicans making tax reform so hard?" by Steve Forbes, Larry Kudlow, Arthur Laffer, and Stephen Moore. Because they gave him a tax plan. Why isn't he just implementing it?
I don't know. They should just...
Well, something about reconciliation, which again, I realize you have to do this like every 6 months, but every once in a while you have to get your reminders about how reconciliation works and what Republicans can and can't do based on that.
Okay.
Because tax reform is going to be one of those things that's going to come up and do this. Although I did see Steve Mnuchin said, we're not ready, and it's probably not even going to be till fall. Because they're finding that because they couldn't pass health care and they couldn't get their huge tax cut to the rich 1% passed, which was really what that health bill was all about, they're having trouble putting together the rest of so-called tax reform because none of it is about middle-class tax cuts.
No. Why would you do that? That's crazy. No, please. Don't get nuts.
Right, but, that's the sort of thing that I think ought to be covered a little bit more. The fact that the Republican House is completely dysfunctional and doesn't know how to govern. That's been true for years, and they haven't really covered it properly.
They do need
that
to show
Paul
that
Ryan is really no wonk when it comes to policy because he doesn't know what he's talking about and can't get any of this stuff passed. That, that Trump's White House is no less dysfunctional, and that when you put the two together, you get nothing done. That's how it should be covered, because that's what's going on.
All right. Yeah, well.
End of the week. I'm in my ranting phase now.
I guess so. I found out who else was in this picture, by the way. Yeah, although I have a name for the person with Kid Rock, although I don't know the relationship. And the first woman is Ted Nugent's wife. This is an important update. This was from dinner last night, apparently. I guess they had, I don't know, maybe like Long John Silver's or something for dinner. And they had a grand old time, and still no understanding here about what Sarah Palin was doing there, other than, unless it was, like I said, an idiot convention of some kind. Too bad. All right. Well, now we're informed. I just wanted to keep everybody up to date.
So one thing I will give you is kind of a semi-thought piece here, and that's by Ed Young, who's a terrific science journalist, and this is in The Atlantic. One of the things that I'm not sure exactly where Trump is going to be this weekend. I can't seem to find that information.
Yeah, I don't know yet either.
But one place he won't be is in the White House.
That's good.
And part of the reason is I don't think he's going to want to be participating in the March for Science, which is going to take place on Earth Day.
Oh, is that okay? Yeah.
What exactly are people marching for when they march for science, says Ed Young. The event has around 21 stated goals.
All right.
Right? They're marching for science, and what does that mean exactly? Well, as Ed says, science isn't a monolithic entity. The term contains multitudes. There's empiricism, there's primacy of evidence in making sense of the world, there's the scientific method, a system for gathering evidence, there's the various fields and subfields in which method is used, there are the people who deploy it, obviously scientists, but also teachers, journalists, doctors, and more. And given that plurality, I wondered, what exactly are people marching for when they're marching for science? So he first tried to answer the question by looking at two sources, the March for Science's website, which is pretty logical, and a Facebook group. Okay. And collating every statement that could be reasonably interpreted as a goal, and he found 21.
What are
read those
demands?
21 there. I mean, I'll just give you a sample of them. Okay. Celebrate passion for science, celebrate what science does for people, and the many ways that science serves our communities in the world, oppose policies that ignore science evidence, or seek to eliminate it entirely, stand up for scientists. These are some of the goals. That's a lot of goals, he says. They also differ substantially in content and approach. Some feel oppositional, others celebratory.
Okay.
Some use language that would not be out of place in a science fair. Others use the rhetoric of protests. Many directly contradict statements that the march is not a political protest or that it's not about scientists or politicians. It's clearly about all of those things. So the relevant question here is, whose interest does science serve? Okay. Of all the tens and thousands of volunteers who have signed up to help with the march, most are not scientists, for example.
Okay, well, they want non-scientist support, so the scientists can do thinking while they're marching.
Right. Critics of the march have suggested it could have a more divisive effect, portraying science as a partisan issue and inextricably linking it to liberal left-wing politics, but Michael Rodman, database administrator from Oklahoma City, disagrees. As a registered Republican, he says his political views have never come up in his discussion with fellow marchers, with whom he finds much common ground. Rodman mentors students who are being poorly served by the state's poor science education standards and rankles at representatives who have tried to disprove global warming by bringing snowballs to the Senate floor. It makes us all look like idiots, he says. A sense of anti-intellectualism has permeated the country, and somebody needs to take a stand. That being said, the people I spoke to, says Ed Young, Rodman included, didn't know of other Republican marchers. They clearly exist, but it's likely they're in the minority. Ordinarily, it would seem partisan for scientists to stand up against a particular administration, but right now, this is an urgent moment in time. There'll be a lot less damage done by scientists gathering in the street than by an administration saying science isn't real. And the person that's being quoted there is somebody named Ferraro, which I suppose is referred to back up in the article somewhere, so I could find that.
You said it's in the Atlantic. Is that right? I'm not seeing this one.
Maybe because I didn't give it to you.
Well, you can provide it, and I'll take a look. It'll be fun to watch I guess the right-wing media try and finagle a way to... do you think there's a convincing way they can tell their people that scientists are rioting?
I don't know.
That's going to be tough.
This was Nicole Ferraro, by the way, writer and editor who will march in New York.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I mean, that may be it. Or they could all have, chemical weapons or something. Like, they're all chemists. They could be making bombs as they march. Bunsen burners are happening.
We'll see. I mean, but, you have some... It's interesting that Ed Young compares this to the Women's March. Same issues, muddled goals, fractured communities, disputes about intersectionality also affected the Women's March, and perhaps inevitably so.
Did they?
It's difficult to pull together an enormous group who may have nothing in common other than the conviction that a country led by Trump endangers their own freedoms and the freedoms they love, wrote Gia Tolentino in The New Yorker. That conviction is nonetheless the beginning of the resistance that those planning to attend the march hope to constitute. And then things that have been pointed out include that groups, top-tier science organizations like the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, which I'm a member of, Society for Neuroscience, and the American Geophysical Union have endorsed the march. Oh, a union.
Yes, well, that's good. And
Bring your union
geophysics
cards.
is a union.
That's historic, though. 6 months ago, you would never have seen that. 6 months from now, will we still see those societies engaging? Everybody who writes that, I just want to strangle. Don't you understand that Trump is going to make this stuff not go away? He is not changing in 6 months. Why would you think that everybody's going to get all upset and do things that they haven't done ever, and then all of a sudden, like a week later, saying, okay, I'm done? That's not how it works.
Oh.
Once you're woke, you're woke.
I guess. I'm puzzled by the...
Tillerson and Pruitt, the guy at EPA, he's going to be the same person, assuming he's still here and hasn't been indicted, in 6 months. Why would you not be just as upset 6 months from now as now?
I don't know. I'm having trouble validating the division theory here, though.
Well, because you have all of these different goals. Are you there to celebrate science, or are you there to oppose the Trump administration? They can be the same thing, but they're not the same thing. And what it gets back to is something we talked a long time ago, which I'll bring up again, the difference between the advocates and the activists. Most of the people marching are going to be advocates.
Yes.
And then some of them are going to be activists, and the two groups are always uncomfortable with each other. The advocates want to work within the system. The advocates want to push the system and change it.
Yes.
The advocates are dependent upon federal funding for what they do. The activists may not be, and so are willing to push harder.
Yes.
There always is going to be that tension. And that's neither surprising nor a bug. It's a feature.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't. We'll see how it goes. I mean, we don't have to wait very long. That's.
I mean, we had what six? How many people voted for Trump? 62 million, 63. How many more voted for Clinton?
Well, how many?
Why didn't all those million people think exactly the same
Yeah.
thing? Because that's not how it works.
What were their demands? I can count at least 21 things that
Exactly.
Trump voters wanted.
Why would you expect a large group to all have exactly the same point of view? It's not how it works. What works is agreeing to march together despite not having the same points of view. This is something that is very difficult to convey to coalition builders who don't want to have a coalition except on their own terms.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's going to be a tremendous problem. I think there's
I don't either.
going to be a pretty good demonstration put together. I think I think for some reason they all agree that geologists don't belong there. For some reason, I don't know why they hate geologists so much, but all right. Well, poor geologists.
Everybody can march except the
only
botanists.
studying
They're
the
at the
earth.
back, right?
Yeah, right. It's only botany. Get out of here.
Get out of here. So, the thing is, though, that like the Women's March, there may have been these contradictions, but it was pulled off beautifully and had a huge effect.
Yeah.
And
Will
so
they
will
have
this.
hats? Is the like beaker-shaped hats or mortar boards, perhaps?
Mortar boards would be good.
That'd be a good idea.
Or maybe that'd be too elitist.
Maybe.
That'd be too front row,
that's just a bachelor's degree. That's pretty, I mean, there are people without, obviously, but it's pretty inclusive. And besides which, nobody knows. The people who don't have them don't even understand that that's necessarily indicative of a bachelor's anyway.
Regardless of all of that,
square
I still
hat.
think
That's
it'll
a
be a
smart
great
guy.
event.
I
And
like
of course, Trump doesn't want to have anything to do with it, so he won't be in Washington.
Okay.
He'll be at one of his properties.
That's how we got done this. That's right. Yeah. So, I don't know whether one more try for Mar-a-Lago or whether it's up to Bedminster this time. I guess he could, if he can't make up his mind, he can just roll out of town and come up here and go to the golf club in Virginia just to be out of the way of the march. And we know he does change his route to get around so he can go places without having to look at protesters.
Mm-hmm.
So, the helicopter.
Anyway, so that's what we have, but we're happy to do it. I see Karen D is writing into Kagro in the morning, hashtag KITM. Ranty Dem from Connecticut is scaring me. I don't mean to scare her. I don't mean to scare anybody. I'll be nice. I'm a nice person.
She's kidding. Yeah.
Just I have it up to my eyeballs sometimes with the press with how they tried to normalize Trump, and I think basically they shouldn't. And I don't think it's part of their job description, and I don't think that they have to do it. So the best thing to do is just cover things the way they are, and one of the things I hope they do is have great coverage of this big March for Science this weekend.
I should hope so. I wonder how they'll cover it. We'll have to see what they do. It's interesting. I mean, are there satellite events around the country? That seems to be key to the success in getting coverage, but I don't think they're doing that. Everybody gathered here.
No, but one way to do it is to focus in on the people from your local community who happen to be there.
Yes. I guess there's that. Or you could march by hologram in other cities. That would be scientific
Blitzer
and
could
awesome.
do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll sit and wait. I had forgotten about the fact that they were having this march, which isn't.
Well, my purpose and function was to bring it up.
Yes. Sorry about that, scientists. But okay. Well, we'll see how he goes and where Trump goes to avoid it, and
and we'll find out. And we'll also, just you're on Notice Media. We're watching you.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. So I missed the very, very, very beginning of your introduction
Me
here.
too.
So what was off about the schedule that was not clear?
Just crazy personal things. There's I'll tell you what it is our older son is getting ready for one of his first AP exam coming up, and so they're having study sessions in class early, which all high schoolers love, coming to school an hour early.
Yeah, because they don't get up early enough in high school.
Yeah, they do it backwards or the correct way, really. The rest of the country does it backwards. In our county, the high school starts last.
Yay! Thank goodness, you guys are enlightened.
And it's unbelievable that they came up with this up here. But of course we reversed that and send him in there early, and he's real happy about it. And they had a little bit of a scheduling mix up because of the spring break the week before. They were supposed to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday study sessions, but then something happened and the teacher had to cancel, so she moved the Monday one to Tuesday, but nobody got the memo, so everybody showed up Monday to find out that they had to come Tuesday that they didn't think they had to do before. But
today's Thursday.
Yeah, so now they've done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday is the non-early day, then back to early again Friday. So Thursday today was the first day that we were back on our normal schedule that we would have been on Monday post spring break. And you know how after a week off, you go back to your own schedule, and first thing in the morning after you wake up, what do I do again? Where am I? How do I work this house? And we didn't get that until today, Thursday. And, so he treated it like it was almost like a vacation day. Oh, I don't have to get up early. And that threw everything off because he's, 10 minutes behind on everything, thinking, I don't have to be there. Yeah, but you still got to get there by 9 o'clock. That's early. Let's go. Move it. Get out of here. So it was a little difficult today. But we'll be back to the wrong schedule of going an hour earlier tomorrow. It's actually much better for me in the morning. If he's out of the house an hour earlier, I have a lot more time to get ready for the show. So more AP exams, I say. All of you start.
Right.
That,
so let me just leave you with two thoughts as I bound off into the sunset.
Yes.
And start to go to work. I'm reminded, looking at Twitter, that yesterday I actually came up with the reason why the Carl Vinson was in the wrong place.
Well, according to who? They thought
they
were
were
in the right place.
To me.
Okay, yes.
It's a guy thing. They never ask directions.
That could be it.
Right? That's one thing. And John Fugelsang points out that with all this discussion about Donald Trump and his taxes, he says at this point, forget about releasing his taxes. I want to see his list of meds.
No, that's a good point.
It's a great point. The fact that the guy is dysfunctional is, again, let's go back to my original rant here.
All right.
Ought really to be the focus of what's going on in Washington and how it's being reported. And people are just avoiding it entirely. That's bad. Yes. Blind spot.
Right. Oh, Bill in Portland, Maine says there are, by the way, satellite science marches all over the place. I assume they've synchronized their watches.
Right.
So that's
it's all synchronized with the atomic clock.
Right. Yeah. It says one signal goes out around the world, and they all begin marching. If you fly up into space and upload a virus into the satellites, you can disrupt that. But don't do it. There are satellite marches all over the place, and there's and you can go to marchforscience.com, and there's a satellite
which is the source of Ed
page.
Young's 21 different things that people are thinking.
Right. So one of the 21 things is, I guess, where you can march other than Washington, D.C. And let me suggest those of you with lots of time on your hands could think about marching wherever Donald Trump goes. There's science there, I promise.
Yeah, protest is always worthwhile. So with that, I will cut short my my short segment, which turned into a long segment.
That's okay with me.
And thanks for having me on. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman Kagro in the morning. And hopefully our levels are good. We haven't talked about that. I hope the gain is set properly, whatever that means. And we'll be back on Monday, and we'll do it again.
Yes, we'll get.
You'll be back tomorrow, but I'll be back on Monday.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, I do have to come back tomorrow. Okay, that's true. Thanks, Greg.
Well, you love this show. Don't forget.
Yes, right. Thank you for reminding me. I'm coming back tomorrow. I love the show.
Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
You too. All right. Very good. Have a good weekend. Let's see. So the latest news is that Ted Nugent's wife's name is Shemaine Deziel. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing that right or not, but there I'm pretty sure that won't matter. I mean, everyone's due the respect of having their name pronounced correctly, but she'll never find out. Also, there, Audrey Berry, who I assume I'm pronouncing correctly because it looks just straight up like Audrey Berry, Kid Rock's fiance, the future Mrs. Rock, Kid, something. He's got a real name. So they're there too, and Sarah Palin is there, and she's actually married, and the first dude, former first dude, first half dude of, I don't know what they call him anymore, up in Alaska. He's not there, or at least he's not in the picture. Maybe he took the picture. That's it. Todd, take this picture. They have a photographer in the White House, I guess, but Good observation somebody made the other day. They publish their pictures pretty regularly. These are not like beautifully composed pictures. Donald Trump likes straight ahead group photos, usually with him seated at the Resolute desk, being resolute, and people standing around him because sitting is a posture that conveys something, blah, blah, blah. He probably read in a book somewhere that makes him look powerful to sit at his desk. Everybody stands around, but it's the same shot, and they're not composed in any way. And people were noticing that, Pete Souza, who had done all the photography in the Obama White House, had such an artful eye for all of this stuff. And the photography was so interesting and telling in a way, whereas this tells nothing but, this is, I guess, the closest substitute we have for the White House logs. These are the pictures he's willing to release. I wonder what other pictures there are out there. That would be interesting. That's a good question. I wonder if there's like a Freedom of Information Act right to the photographic record. Because I assume that even people that Trump is, for whatever reason, embarrassed to acknowledge have been at the White House or is keeping their name private for one reason or another, still ask for pictures. And the photographer is almost certainly paid with federal funds. I wonder whether, well, now we have a case here. Someone should sue for the test strips of the White House photographer, assuming there is one. And I think there is. She's just not particularly interesting or good, or maybe is just under orders from Trump. Like, look, I only want pictures done this way. Take a picture of me from my good side, which is 100 miles away. I don't know. You could see him maybe being a little bit weird like that. All right, let's see. Are there any other things to catch up on? Thank you to everybody who tried to pitch in filling in the blanks. Justice, in particular, gave me the names of both of the otherwise unidentified women, or I guess I should say nobody's identified in this picture, are they? Maybe some, depending on what version of it you see, they identify the people. I was only able to recognize 3 of them, I guess, is what it should be. It's not that they're unidentified, it's just I don't know who they are. Anyway, thanks for filling in the blanks. Let's see. Also a comment here, Parlio, saying that his Spanish source, El Diario, has, that is the newspaper there, has a deal with The Guardian to run various translated articles for a broader worldview. So I guess, in other words, in Spain, which had an empire of its own, of course, but didn't have a Spanish news network necessarily, as a successor to the Spanish Empire. But I guess even in Spain, that when they recognize the need for a broader international perspective, they turn to The Guardian, which isn't BBC, of course, but I guess the rest of the British press just carries on the tradition of active interest in the rest of the world, unlike the rest of us here, or those of us here in the United States anyway. And in Spain, they recognize that they don't have the network, they do have the interest. Maybe it's a European thing, being that there are so many countries there and you can't get by with an isolationist approach to anything in the middle of Europe. But, a different story for us here in America. But if you're looking for the upside of imperialism, I guess that's it. A couple hundred years later, you tend to take an active interest in the rest of the world, even when it could otherwise be ignored. But if you could go straight to that and skip the imperialism, that would probably be best for everybody. Okay, other sources of interesting news here in Pocket. There's a couple of things. Here's something I want to put on record. Piece from Will Bunch, and plenty of you probably following Will, writing in the Philadelphia Inquirer, making a point which I think we've kind of danced around up to this point, but really needs to be laid out. And I think we set the table for it in noting the other day that Paul Manafort was working with one or another of the Chinese billionaires in trying to wrangle new deals for them to be a part of the big infrastructure investment bill, if that ever happens here in the United States. And just sort of the weird coziness with the trademarks and the way they've been handling the Chinese, since having them over and since agreeing to get them to come over to Mar-a-Lago, Trump has hated the Chinese an awful lot less. And it always sort of felt a little bit like an act, and like he was sort of putting up a tough facade with them in order to see if he could soften them, not for American foreign policy purposes, but for personal business purposes. And if we haven't said it outright, then too bad. I'm sorry we didn't, but I meant to. But thankfully, Will Bunch has done it. Trump family's worst scandal may be China, not Russia. This doesn't mean take your eyes off Russia. It's a different kind of scandal. The Russia angle scandal, or the Russia scandal, is, like I say, of a different sort. That is to say, the collusion, if this bears out, with Russian operatives to try to sway the outcome of the election is one thing, and one particular kind of enormous problem. Interference in our own system of democracy, such as it is, and our free elections, such as they are, versus the straight-up corruption angle with the Chinese. The Chinese didn't, I don't know whether they had any particular interest, I guess I should say. Maybe they did, but they didn't manifest it in any way that we have detected to date. But they may have not had any particular interest in who won the election or in affecting who won the election. But they certainly perked up after Trump did win, even though he had been so disparaging of China in his rhetoric. I think they saw pretty clearly that he was pretty easy to read in terms of how do you get on Trump's good side? Give him money. So let's do that. And like I said, it doesn't require that you ignore or minimize in any way or reduce in any way the importance of the Russia story. So don't worry about that. I don't need to hear complaints about that. You can easily follow both, although it is an awful lot to keep an eye on. But that's part of the complication with the Trump gang. They run a lot of scams, and you don't have to decide which one's worse necessarily. But in case you were interested in doing so, Phil Bunch says maybe China rather than Russia. Why? Here's why. The big story this afternoon, and that would have been yesterday, I guess. Let's see. It just says it was updated yesterday. The big story yesterday, it was the end of Bill O'Reilly's 20-year reign of terror at 8 p.m. on the Fox News channel. But when word came, just had to get that in there. But when word came down that an escalating series of sexual harassment claims against cable TV ratings king had finally led to his ouster, there was just one thing I couldn't stop thinking. Is there anything that President Trump can't get away with? This is an interesting kind of opening. After all, O'Reilly and Trump are both powerful men who've been accused of sex-related misconduct over their career, each with a slew of new accusations in recent months. In the O'Reilly case, the endgame... Why am I talking about this? I don't know. Well, I swear that's the beginning of the article titled "The Trump Family's Worst Scandal May Be China, Not Russia." So I'll give some leeway to Bunch here and let him make his artistic point, I guess. Right. So both have been accused of sex-related misconduct over their careers, each with a slew of new accusations in recent months. In the O'Reilly case, the endgame began when the quote, failing, New York Times reported on the $13 million his bosses had paid out to settle a variety of claims over the TV star's creepy, or worse, behavior. In the Trump matter, more than a dozen women have come forward to accuse the man who then became America's 45th president of groping or other sexually inappropriate conduct. I know what you're saying. There's a big difference here, and you're right. Unlike O'Reilly, Trump has actually admitted on tape that he assaults women, although apparently there's some tape that exists on O'Reilly too, but it's not him admitting to some third party that he assaults women. It's tape of him assaulting them. Anyway, yes, oh, by the way, whatever happened to Trump's promise to immediately sue all the women who had accused him after the election? I noticed that hasn't materialized, and I'm not anxious for it to materialize, but it's just another one of those deadline/promises that he insisted would happen after the election. It didn't. Another one popped up today, too, as a matter of fact, and I think I put that aside in pocket somewhere. I don't want to get too distracted, but yeah, now I've lost track of it here. But I guess he was, since I can't find it immediately, why don't I not lose track of Will Bunch's article and continue with that? Okay. People voted in both cases, he says. With O'Reilly, the system, that is to say capitalism, worked as regular people told advertisers they wouldn't buy their products if they stuck with the embattled Fox host. With Trump, some 3 million more people voted for his opponent, but not in the right states. The Electoral College winner who took the oath on January 20th seemed to conclude one thing from his 2016 experience, that none of the rules of ethics, morality, or even gravity seem to apply to Donald Trump or his palace court. The president, his children, and their spouses, and his inner circle have overwhelmed our already weakened body politic with far more ethical abuses than it can handle. Trump's ascent has, if nothing else, exposed the shocking weakness of our conflict of interest laws. And with a Congress where the GOP majority desperately needs for Trump to somehow succeed to save their own jobs, with a conservative judiciary and an economically diminished news media, who is powerful enough to stop him? One quick example from the news this week, the turmoil in Turkey, which we haven't gotten to, have we? The presidential family's Trump organization has a substantial investment in Istanbul, including dealings with Turkey's increasingly autocratic leader, President, remember the pronunciation we learned, right? Erdogan? Is that how we decided to do it with the G as a Y? I still haven't learned the rest of his name, though. We're going to have to work on that one. Okay, anyway, let's see. He, by the way, attended the grand opening of the Trump Tower project in Istanbul, in case you were wondering. I have a little conflict of interest, Trump himself told a radio host named Steve Bannon. Whatever happened to him, it says, in December of 2015, this week when Erdogan claimed 51% of a vote amid cries of fraud, the vote essentially giving him dictatorial powers. I didn't even know you could vote people that. The U.S. State Department voiced caution, yet Trump called to congratulate the strongman. Shrewd diplomacy, or was that our president's little conflict of interest in Istanbul talking? The answer, of course, is a matter of vital importance. That was 2 days and seemingly 100 years ago. This afternoon, the New York Times reported that the world's largest oil company, ExxonMobil, is continuing to press the U.S. Treasury Department, who heads that? Just wondering, to be exempted from the U.S. sanctions imposed on Russia after it seized Crimea in order to conclude a lucrative deal with the Russian energy giant Rosneft. That name again. The man who was the oil company's CEO when that effort was launched is now President Trump's Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who wrecks everything. Approval for this deal in Washington would confirm a lot of people's worst fears about too much coziness between Team Trump and Mother Russia. So just to make sure we have all the moving pieces here, ExxonMobil, which used to be Rex Tillerson's operation, wants a waiver of the sanctions against Russia so that they can conclude a deal that would enrich ExxonMobil, but also enrich, presumably, Russian energy company Rosneft, which the Steele dossier, which is still hanging out there and becoming more and more relevant each day, as it turns out, alleges, 19% or something of the company got sold in a deal to work to lift the sanctions so that this bargain could go forward, and the Trump inner circle was the supposed beneficiary of that sale. That is awfully strange, but that's not even the story about China. We haven't even gotten to that one yet. Of all the many, many Trump scandals, real or apparent, this tangled web between all the president's men and women and Vladimir Putin's Russia that has received the lion's share of attention. By the way, this previous paragraph reminded me of something. Have I got what I thought. Oh, yeah. Having mentioned the Steele dossier, there's a story related to that, too, which we also haven't yet put our marker down on. Where is that? I'm pretty sure we definitely put that aside, but there was a story over the weekend. I know this is in here somewhere. We'll just have to find the right headline. That part of the ongoing surveillance of Carter Page, who was rumored to be a part of the Rosneft sale deal, right? That part of the reason that the feds were able to put together a successful FISA warrant request on him and put him under FISA surveillance. Apparently, the word is that they used the Steele dossier in the court proceedings to convince the FISA court that there was reasonable suspicion here to go ahead with surveillance of Carter Page, which is interesting. It's a reminder, one, that they've had that dossier in their hands for considerably more time than we've known about it. And two, that the federal investigators and the intelligence community, I guess, feel that they've at least, I guess they could go to court and lie. There's no reason to believe that they're incapable of doing this, but they must have told the court anyway that they had either corroborated or had good reason to believe that the information with respect to the Rosneft sale and Carter Page in particular was accurate enough that they would ask, as officers of the court, that the FISA court grant them a warrant against Page. It's a little bit circular, or it seems a little bit circular, except, it might not necessarily be the case. Like I said, they have had that dossier for considerably longer than we've known about it, which means that they had put enough stock in at least its claims about Carter Page even before the election to go ahead and get that FISA warrant. And that maybe, I guess, makes Comey's decisions all the more troubling. So I guess we've just ruined Greg's weekend. All right. Well, anyway, back to Will Bunch's story, because he was about to get off of Russia and move on. Of all the many, many Trump scandals, real or apparent, it is this tangled web between all the president's men and women and Vladimir Putin's Russia that has received the lion's share of attention. From the resistance to Trump's president, that's what it says, resistance to Trump's presidency, I guess, out in the streets, and from left-leaning media. And as I've noted repeatedly, Trump critics aren't wrong to pursue it. During the short time I've been writing today's column, Reuters is reporting that a Russian think tank, who knew they had these? That's a good point. I thought the same thing. Close to Putin, came up with a written plan, an actual written plan. I don't know why they would write this down, to undermine America's 2016 election. Another story we haven't gotten to yet. Not realizing we were perfectly capable of that's what it says, bleeping it up on our own. Thank you very much. But there's a lot of smoke with Trump and Russia, and it turns blacker every day. Still, I can't help but wonder why more attention isn't being paid to the Trump administration's unseemly dealings with an even bigger world power. Ooh, the Russians are not going to like that. And an even more lucrative market for both the Trump organization and his daughter and son-in-law, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. That would be China. On the campaign trail in 2015 and 2016, Trump talked about China less like a candidate for the Oval Office and more like the boss of a Brooklyn extortion racket. In his first fall 2016 debate with Hillary Clinton, he accused the world's most populous nation of, quote, using our country as a piggy bank, unquote. In pre-1/20/2017 Trump world, China was our trading enemy, the world's worst currency manipulator, and the perpetrators of an elaborate hoax on climate change. We forgot about that one. The talk got even tougher as Trump's November election, when he spoke on the phone to Beijing's Bête Noire, the head of Taiwan and threatened to abandon the one China policy that has governed U.S.-Sino relations for decades. But since last fall, some very odd things have happened. Around the same time, Trump said that son-in-law Kushner would be his point man on dealing with China and pretty much on everything else, it emerged that Kushner had also been neck-deep in negotiations for a joint venture to rescue the troubled jewel of his own family's real estate empire, the skyscraper at 666 Fifth Avenue, involving a powerful and mysterious Chinese firm. The would-be investor, the giant Anbang Insurance Group, remember them, is closely tied to top Chinese officials. The company's chief is related by marriage to the legendary late communist leader Deng Xiaoping. Those negotiations, which began around the time Trump clinched the Republican presidential nomination, collapsed only after the glare of scrutiny in the New York Times and elsewhere. What other weird things have been happening? Less than a month after Trump took office, Chinese officials reversed course and granted the Trump Organization a trademark that the president's company had been seeking for roughly a decade. There's some dispute over the value of the trademark, but what's not disputed is that nothing like this has ever happened before. An American president continuing to own his share in a large multinational business, allegedly run in a, quote, blind trust by his two eldest sons, but not really, although that's about as close to blind as you could get, having those two guys run anything. At the same time, he's making huge policy decisions involving countries where that business operates. This week came the kicker. The Associated Press reported that Ivanka Trump's company won provisional approval from the Chinese government for 3 new trademarks, giving it monopoly rights to sell Ivanka brand jewelry, bags, and spa services in the world's second largest economy. That same night, we should say, the first daughter and her husband, the guy who was trying to work out the deal on the skyscraper, sat next to the president of China and his wife for a steak and Dover sole dinner at Mar-a-Lago. The AP noted that sales of Ivanka Trump's merchandise, much of the product is also made in China, are skyrocketing since her dad became the so-called leader of the free world. This is all happening as the president's daughter takes an office in the West Wing and becomes an increasingly influential advisor. Did I mention there's no precedent for any of this? Some, not me, but some, that's Will Bunch saying that, would argue that even though the appearances here are not good, the Trump family dealings on China aren't corruption because there's no quid pro quo. Really? Because it seems like quids and quos are going back and forth faster than a Wimbledon title match. In early February, Trump called Chinese President Xi Jinping to say that despite December's head fake, his administration would support the one China policy after all. Earlier this month, Trump told the Wall Street Journal that China is actually not a currency manipulator and wouldn't be sanctioned after all. A complete reversal from his over-the-top campaign threats. You could certainly make the case that the flip-flops on Taiwan and currency were sound moves, but it's hard to mentally divorce them from the knowledge that the Trumps and Kushner are wedded to their lucrative China dealings, which depend upon the goodwill of Beijing. The whole thing is crazy. By the way, I don't think we've mentioned in here that is Bank of China the largest tenant of Trump Tower, the largest business tenant anyway? I don't know whether that's necessarily the case, but I know that they're a major tenant, and I guess they could move anywhere they wanted to. But, although maybe they feel, if you ask them, they probably feel locked in. We can't move. The president will be mad at us. Well, the whole thing is crazy. Bunch continues. Here in Philadelphia, we're indicting some of our top politicians for things like getting a freebie trip to the islands. Penny ante stuff when compared to the RICO enterprise at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm here scratching my bald head now that this doesn't violate the emoluments clause of the U.S. Constitution. Why is this? This is a weird sentence. Is this written right? I'm here scratching my bald head. How? Okay, I'm not seeing it correctly. Not now, but how? How this doesn't violate the emoluments clause of the U.S. Constitution? It does. It's just we don't know what to do about it. Which prevents a president. How? How does it prevent a president? It says you shouldn't, but doesn't prevent anything. prevents a president from enriching himself in dealing with foreign governments, the blatant violation of which would seem to be an impeachable offense. The media has done a good job digging up and promulgating the many, many conflicts of interest in this administration, and the China dealings seem especially egregious. Yet it never seems to go beyond an indignant headline. Who will have the courage to actually investigate these conflicts, which definitely violate the norms of a functioning democracy and may well violate the law as well? It's especially important to sort out the Trump-China mess as tensions escalate on the Korean Peninsula, with China perhaps the only nation that can influence the rogue nuclear-armed government of North Korea. I don't think we want a trademark for Ivanka's handbags to be the hang-up standing between peace and a potential World War III. I'm pretty sure he's right about that. I think most people probably would say that. I would rather that not be the issue. But, yeah, you never know. Okay. I don't think I can open up this whole article here, but I wanted to at least note for the record. It is Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal covering this particular topic most extensively. And, of course, that's one I don't yet subscribe to and probably won't. But, yes, they've been doing the lead on the reporting that Exxon seeks U.S. waiver to resume Russia oil venture. And the snippet that they give me here before they ask us to subscribe to read the rest, I guess there's not much new, so it's not even worth reading that snippet aloud. But I just, we have to at least still give credit to the Wall Street Journal, as ridiculous as they are, for being the one on top of that story. Let's see. To head back to Korea or Indonesia or Australia or whatever it is, I thought I'd pick this piece up. This sounds like maybe he's working at the same type of conclusion that Joan and I batted around yesterday. But Josh Marshall, wondering aloud in his TPM editor's blog, WTF? What the F happened with the Carl Vinson? Just trying to figure things out here. Sean Spicer got asked about the Carl Vinson mystery today. It was sad. Josh writes, Spicer basically said, "Oh, you misunderstood what we meant. Sucks to be you." Actual quotes and more, of course, are offered elsewhere. That's silly. Here's what happened, or rather what I think we can be fairly confident happened based on the totality of evidence and anonymous sources at the Pentagon reported in the press. TPM's Matt Schuham has just published a detailed timeline of the events in question, and it's linked therein. So this, it looks like Josh's read is kind of similar. I don't know. Let's see. We'll read through it and see if it feels similar to what we landed on yesterday. A carrier strike group, which is, of course, an armada of ships led by an aircraft carrier. It says lead, unless you're supposed to read that as the element of led, but L-E-D is the preferred spelling here. An armada of ships led by an aircraft carrier, the modern capital ship, doesn't turn around on a dime. I don't mean that literally, although you might as well say it doesn't turn around on a dime. But why he had to say that, I don't know. I'm sure the armada of ships can make an immediate shift in direction if necessary, but these are big groups of ships with thousands of seamen, a schedule of maneuvers, trainings, exercises, ports of call, etc. Changing plans and going somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean literally turning around immediately and canceling everything that was planned. Making a significant short-term scheduling change is a reasonably big deal in itself. What seems to have happened is that the decision was made to send the carrier group back to waters around the Koreas. They didn't cancel a planned exercise to the south, but scrapped a port of call in Australia to get back to the waters around Korea and Japan more quickly. This was a significant change of plans and would have sent what seems to have been the intended signal, a bit of saber rattling in the context of the current standoff between North Korea and the United States. My point is that the original Pentagon statements were reasonable descriptions of what was happening. But then the White House, and particularly the President, said things that were much more direct and clearly at best misleading. What is key is that this does not seem to have been some intentional misdirection or ambiguity. The Korean Peninsula is not a war zone at the moment, thankfully, but there is a standoff and military assets are being used for a tactical political purpose. Nation states don't consider themselves bound to strict transparency in such cases, understandably. If we had learned later that the U.S. had said something was happening which was not true to drive the anxiety in North Korea, this would not have been entirely surprising. But again, that does not seem to be what happened. It seems much more like the White House and the president got sloppy, didn't know exactly what was happening, and through sloppiness and bravado created an impression that simply wasn't true. There doesn't seem to have been, any one single misstatement, more a slow process of overstatement that led to erroneous information becoming assumed by everyone. Spicer is now saying it's the press's fault they misunderstood, but the publics and press in the region seem to have misunderstood too. And it even seems like the governments may have understood. Those are the kinds of misunderstandings which, if not by design, it's the U.S. government's responsibility to clarify. And in fact, a key point in the rhetorical escalation seems to have come from Spicer himself. On April 11th, Fox News' Kevin Corke had this exchange with Spicer. Question: putting that strike carrier group in the Sea of Japan, in that region, is that also a messaging circumstance? What a weird phrasing. Or is that simply protective for our allies in Japan and Korea? Mr. Spicer answers, a carrier group is several things. The forward deployment is deterrence, presence. It's prudent, but it does a lot of things. It ensures we have the strategic capabilities, and it gives the president options in the region. But I think when you see a carrier group steaming into an area like that, the forward presence of that is clearly, through almost every instance, a huge deterrence. So I think it serves multiple capabilities. It's a bit of a massive statement, but okay. I can work out what that's supposed to mean. So Corke asked a question with a factual premise, and Spicer seemed to affirm that inaccurate factual premise and escalated. Did Spicer just not know? It seems like he was simply carried along with the misunderstanding. The following day, President Trump addressed the issue, but his statement wasn't really clearly misleading as to timing. It just pumped up the decision to send the group back to the north. Asked by Fox News Channel's Maria Bartiromo, what are we doing right now in terms of North Korea? Trump answered, we are sending an armada. Very powerful. Actually, the back and forth is weirder than that. Bartiromo asks him, he says he doesn't want to talk about it. Then he talks about the Middle East. Then he says he doesn't want to talk about it. And then he talks about it. And I guess this is still the other part of the beautiful chocolate cake interview. Bartiromo asks, you redirected Navy ships to go toward the Korean Peninsula. What are we doing right now in terms of North Korea? And Trump says, you never know, do you? Which is funny, because in print that looks like, you never know, do you? Like, Maria, you never know what's going on, do you? That's weird. But he's just using the turn of phrase. You never know. You never know, do you? You never know. Bartiromo says, that's all, and then inaudible. Good question, Maria. Trump says, this is funny. This is what it says. I don't think about the military. I know you don't think about a lot of things, but I think he meant, I don't talk about the military. But it's funny that it came out think. I don't know whether he said think or whether they slipped and wrote think or what, but that's pretty funny. I don't think about the military. Bartiromo, yes. And then he goes on to say, I'm not like Obama, where they talk about in 4 months, we're waiting, we're going to hit Mosul. Bartiromo says, right. Trump continues, and in the meantime, they get ready, and like you've never seen, look, they're still fighting. Mosul was supposed to last for a week, and now they've been fighting it for many months, and so many more people died. I don't want to talk about it. We are sending an armada, very powerful. We have submarines, very powerful, far more powerful than the aircraft carrier. That I can tell you. So, the thing about Trump is he loves being quoted in the press. We all know that. I mean, he loves it enough to have made a habit in the 1980s of calling columnists and pretending to be his own spokesperson. And, even there when he's not quoted in the press, he wants his phrasing to be in the press, even when he wants to disguise its source. But, he can't simply let things lie even when he says it's my policy and I'm so much better than Obama because I don't like to telegraph what I'm doing with the military. He needs to show the press that he's in the know and that other people don't. So even when he tells you something that's perfectly obvious that everybody in the world already knows, there's no classification level to it at all. He adds the turn of phrase, that I can tell you, which he's done. I mean, he's always used that even before there was such a thing as classified information in the hands of Donald Trump. But he uses it doubly to hint that he's telling you some sort of insider information, and it's also just sort of a crutch phrase for him. That I can tell you. I just did tell you that, and I need to say more words, and so here are some more. That I can tell you. I know you can tell me. You just told me. That's how I know you. But yeah, in this case, it's, that I can tell you. The rest I would have to kill you for. And so what is he telling us? That I can tell you. I'm permitted to tell you we have aircraft carriers. We even have submarines. Both of them are very powerful. That I can tell you. But he cannot walk away from an opportunity to look, even if only to himself, like he has impressed the world and these reporters with his knowledge. So Josh picks up after this, looking at most of, I don't know, I guess that's just an editing issue, looking at most of the escalating statements, something, came from the White House or President Trump. This is a weird bit here. Looking at looking at everything, maybe? Looking at everything, most of the escalating statements came from the White House or President Trump. But there's a key exception. On the same day Spicer got into his exchange, April 11th, Secretary of Defense Mattis gave a briefing at the Pentagon at which he said the decision to send the Vincent carrier group north wasn't tied to any particular event. Which, that just sounds like what the Pentagon would say, An event very clearly, noted by the world has happened here in North Korea. Now an aircraft carrier group is on its way there. But the Pentagon is always going to say, no, there's no linkage between the two. Even when it's obvious that there is, they just say there isn't. So, nothing new there, really. But that's what they decide to issue. As far as the movement of the Vincent, she is stationed there in the Western Pacific for a reason. She operated freely up and down the Pacific, and she is just on her way up there because that is where we thought it was most prudent to have her at this time. Which of course means it's going up there because of some events, and that's why it's prudent. But okay, this way they just get to continue to say, no, it's not related, if that's good for us. And if it's bad, and it turns out we want to say it's related to an event, we can go ahead and say that later. Out of context, this is perhaps a bit ambiguous. She is just on her way up there can be a general reference to movements in the context of the group routinely moving around the Western Pacific. But notably, there's this, and an exchange from a Pentagon briefing room interview. Question that part of which is inaudible, and then picks up at something unusual for us to know about a ship movement in advance. Like, isn't it unusual? That was sort of what got everyone's attention. So why was that? I mean, why was it put out in advance? Was it just to signal to North Korea that there would be a show of presence there? Secretary Mattis, answering that question, says, I believe it's because she was originally headed in one direction for an exercise, and we canceled our role in that exercise, and that's what became public. We had to explain why she wasn't in that exercise. And then it's noted here, no, actually it was the ship's port visit to Fremantle, Australia that was canceled. The exercise with the Royal Australian Navy is proceeding as planned. So the parenthetical correction is from the Pentagon, Josh tells us, but it's from yesterday, according to a DoD spokesman. So after the news stories confirming that there had been confusion about the location of the carrier group. Mattis's references here make it clear there was at least some level of confusion from Mattis himself. It seems like he may have been unclear in his own mind whether or how much of the exercises were curtailed or canceled altogether. At a minimum, his comments were misleading, but again, they were mainly misleading in the context of inflated comments from the White House and the president. At this point, what seems to have happened is that people at the planning and operational level started realizing that what was being discussed in the news, and maybe even privately with U.S. allies, is the U.S. and in the U.S. and the region wasn't really true. But they seem to have refrained from clarifying or contradicting these erroneous reports, thinking that these public declarations were political decisions that weren't, which it wasn't their place to contradict, so they didn't. Here's a key passage from the story in Defense News that first reported the carrier group's real whereabouts. U.S. Navy officials in Pearl Harbor and Washington declined to comment on the ship's movement, other than to confirm the April 15 movement through the Sunda Strait. Off the record, several officials expressed wonderment at the persistent reports that the Vinson was already nearing Korea. "We've made no such statement," said one official. Not contradicting what the White House was saying might make sense if it seemed like the White House was being deliberately misleading. It seems more like they were confused. At a minimum, it seems clear that people at the operational level were quite aware that people on both sides of the Pacific were assuming something was true that was not true. At the end of the day, this looks like the product of confusion and miscommunication within the administration. That's a problem. It didn't have any cataclysmic effect in this case, but in a high-stakes standoff mixed with gunboat diplomacy, it could have. And I guess it still could. Very strange situation. I think it's a little bit confusingly done here even, but it certainly feels like we were coming to the same conclusion yesterday, that the Pentagon may have, on its own, perhaps, or in consultation with the White House, decided that, yeah, we are going to turn the battle group around, although I guess the news story is after the exercises, which, could only last a couple of days. They could be all finished up with pretty quickly. And instead of going forward with the original plan to then have a port of call visit in, what was it? I can't remember the name of the city in Australia. But instead of doing that, then right after the exercises, they would head back up to Korea. Not for any particular reason, just because we think it would be prudent to hang around the Korean peninsula right now. Okay, fine. So that gets communicated as a decision of the Pentagon to turn the battle group around, and okay, fine. Where are they going to go? Korea. Okay, good. That's in keeping with what we would like to see happening with policy. And then the president turned that into, I guess he didn't think it was, cool enough, if he knew, and it's a question mark. I mean, I don't know if Trump has any idea how long it takes to get from exercises in the Indian Ocean to the Korean Peninsula with a battle group. So, having had the word that they were turning around and going, I mean, with him, I don't travel in anything that takes more than a couple of hours. So, the rest of the world has to move at the same pace. So within a couple of hours, they'll end up back there. I mean, he may just be one of those guys that believes the U.S. military is magical. And because we can move some forces anywhere in the world within a couple of hours, we can move all forces anywhere in the world within a couple of hours. But maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. But either way, it's not particularly impressive to tell Maria Bartiromo that, these guys are going to go through some exercises, and then instead of heading to Australia for a couple days off, they're going to turn around and make their way back to the Korean Peninsula, and they'll be there in like 2 weeks. That's just not very tough sounding. So instead, we're sending an armada. They're steaming their way toward the Korean Peninsula as we speak. Well, and I think it seems like the position that the White House is finally coming to is not too far off from what we were joking about the other day. We're headed towards the Korean Peninsula in that the Earth is round, and we're just going around the long way to approach Korea from the other side, which of course you can't do because land masses, etc. But they're really they're hoping that they'll get the benefit of the doubt and people will understand that steaming toward Korea is true even though they were literally, one, not steaming, but two, heading in the opposite direction. Well, the point is they're heading in the opposite direction with the idea in mind that they would engage in exercises and then turn around and go back. The exercise was previously scheduled, but then a port visit, which was scheduled, is canceled. So they're heading back towards the Korean Peninsula sooner than they would otherwise have been heading toward the Korean Peninsula. And I assume that even if the Korean Peninsula wasn't their destination, leaving Australia and going anywhere could reasonably be interpreted, unless you're headed back to Hawaii, it would obviously be, and could easily be interpreted as being headed toward Korea. I mean, if you're heading to Indonesia, you're still headed toward Korea if you're leaving from Australia. So I don't know. But I think that they thought that it was fair game to say it's heading to Korea. It's in 2 weeks, but the plans have been made and they know where they're going now. And so their course now is into the Indian Ocean, to the exercise, and then a turnaround and back to Korea. But they're on that route as we speak, even though they're not actually pointed at Korea yet. Does that make some sense? I mean, now that I think is a distraction from the Russia story and is a distraction from the China story. But I don't know. Sometimes I think it's worth trying to figure out how these guys' heads work. Other interesting items that we really have to catch up on are buried a couple days down here. We'll have to kind of scroll down. I mentioned to you, and now I can't come up with it, and I hope I can make a note to myself to try and find the article about the Steele dossier being used to justify the FISA warrants. But I have some older stories, actually, that are really interesting. Now that we have that story, I wonder if I can scroll down. I have a piece down here somewhere. Here we are. From McClatchy. How old is this? I mean, nothing is ancient. April 14th. It does seem like an eternity ago to talk about April 14th. They did a story, and maybe they were the first source of it. McClatchy often does end up this way, and they put these headlines on it that get rewritten by other outlets covering McClatchy work, and I keep thinking, McClatchy should have had this headline instead. There's this point, April 14th was, why did FBI suspect Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page, was a foreign agent? And I put this one aside and said, let's read it on the air, and I never did. And so I don't know the content of it. And I'm wondering if this isn't just basically the original source of the news that they depended on, the Steele dossier. Because if it doesn't say so explicitly, then they would make some interesting pieces to read together, wouldn't they? Well, Kevin Hall reported on the 14th thus. He has a lengthy military background, academic credentials, and, until recently, a largely apolitical financial career. But now, Carter Page is a central character in the investigation into Russia's meddling in the United States election. And this week, it was disclosed that he's been under Justice Department surveillance because of suspicion he acted as a foreign agent. In an interview Friday, I mean, this is a good question. Specifically, why did you think he acted as a foreign agent? I wanted to know that. In an interview Friday, where he revealed new information about his military intelligence experience, the evasive Page said he had no idea why the Justice Department sought powers to surveil him. Let's see what's in this application to the court, and we'll see what comes out, because I have done nothing wrong, he said. Donald Trump announced in March 2016 that Page was one of his campaign's foreign policy advisors, yet Page has for months refused to say who brought him into the campaign. On CNN earlier last week, he ruled out former campaign chief Paul Manafort as his conduit. Manafort himself faces questions about Russia ties, and Page told McClatchy last month that he had never met former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Interesting. Fired for not being forthcoming about his own Russian ties. Page told McClatchy on Friday that he has offered to testify before congressional panels investigating links between Russia and the Trump campaign. He remains involved in Russia through his investment firm, Global Energy Capital, LLC, which focuses on energy investment and advisory services in developing markets. And, of course, blah, 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 Rosneft, yada, yada. The company is privately held, so Page doesn't disclose his investors. It has a small internet footprint. For example, in online documents, it doesn't appear as a partner of other companies that file with the Securities and Exchange Commission. What little is known about it comes from a June 9th, 2008 confidential cable to the State Department from the U.S. Embassy in Turkmenistan. It details how Page and his then partner, James Richard, had visited the embassy in Ashgabat 3 days earlier while attending an oil conference. The cable said the pair had met with the Deputy Prime Minister for Oil and were looking to assemble an investment fund of $1 billion. And I guess that's still considered small change, so they're not not registered or not filing with the SEC. It is very interesting, by the way, that his company apparently considers itself so small that it doesn't appear, like I said, as a partner in other companies' filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. It's weird that a company so small, with a profile so small, would be offered a piece of the sale of nearly 20% of a Russian oil and gas monopoly, don't you think? The cable noted that the pair had offered to invest in state companies to make them, quote, substantially more powerful than they currently are, whatever that's supposed to mean. Page had described his work in Moscow, the cable said, as having helped take Russia's Gazprom from a normal state oil company to, quote, super major status. Interesting. Everyone loves the super major. Even very, very powerful. Super major powerful. They're going to have a super powerful something was mentioned today from the North Koreans as well. Page wanted to attract global investors to energy projects in the former Soviet republics. That Turkmenistan project never got off the ground, he confirmed Friday, clarifying that he is involved in energy projects in the United States and globally, not just Russia. So what were the Justice Department's reasons for spying on Page, a U.S. citizen and a military veteran? The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court documents are secret, but privacy advocates have long complained that the bar for surveillance is too low. From June 8th to December 31st, 2015, the last period for which data is available, there were 1,010 applications for authority to surveil. All but 5 were approved. Another 169 were accepted after modification. Page did have what he describes as an unwitting exchange with a spy who said he was a Russian United Nations official. Page confirmed that he cooperated with the FBI in its prosecution of a Russian intelligence operative, and 2 other Russian agents. In an April 3rd statement, Page said he had shared parts of a lecture that amounted to publicly available information with a person he thought was a UN official. It is interesting that he continues to maintain, I mean, you're going to maintain your innocence, obviously, when you're under public scrutiny like this, but it's interesting that he continues to characterize the situation as one. I have no idea why the FBI would be interested in me. Well, like, if it were me, I would have no idea why the FBI was interested in me, but if, on the other hand, I had previously cooperated with the FBI in the prosecution of Russian intelligence operatives and 2 other Russian agents, and then found the FBI interested in me, I might say you're wrong, but I would not say I have no idea why you're interested in me. You were interested in me when I helped you prosecute 3 Russian agents already. I think it's probably pretty obvious why they might be interested in you. They may be wrong, but why they're interested is not a mystery. Page also received largely unreported attention from nationalist organizations within Russia that could have invited scrutiny. The Moscow television station Tsargrad covered him before, during, and after his speech to the new economic school in Moscow. Tsargrad is owned by right-wing nationalist Konstantin Malofeev, who was sanctioned by the Obama administration and European allies for allegedly bankrolling Russian nationalists in the Crimean Peninsula, which was seized by Russian leader Vladimir Putin's forces in February of 2014. Tsargrad is affiliated with a nationalist think tank called Katehon, also funded by Malofeev. I wonder if it's the same one as was mentioned in the other story. Tsargrad's editor in chief is Alexander Dugin, a conservative sage really, who wrote confidently on Katahone's website, Katahon, I have no idea how you pronounce that, in February of 2016 that Trump's nationalist message would carry him to the U.S. presidency. Maybe that's why he's a sage. Page said Friday he did not know Malafiev or Dugin, but they seem to have taken special interest in him. Both are long allied with Putin. Konstantin Malafiev served as one of the chief financiers of Russian mercenaries fighting against the Ukrainian government. He was sanctioned by the U.S. for directly aiding and abetting Russia's proxies, said Mike Carpenter, Deputy Assistant Defense Secretary from 2015 until last January, and a Russia specialist. As a leader of the Eurasian Youth Movement, Dugin mobilized Russian volunteers to fight in Ukraine alongside Russian forces and Russian-backed separatists, said Carpenter, for which the United States sanctioned him. What about the motorcycle gangs? Did he work with them? I'm still fascinated by that one. Page's speech in Moscow last July 7th drew this commentary on the Katahon website. After the reunification of Crimea with Russia, wow, and the beginning of operations in Ukraine, he was one of the few American experts who called for understanding the actions of Russia. Page came out openly against the interventionist policy of NATO, which in his opinion, provoked Russia with its expansion. It was the speech and media reaction in the United States, fanned by the Hillary Clinton campaign, insists Page, that led to Page's separation from the campaign weeks later. Page played a minor role in the campaign, said Sam Nunberg, a senior Trump strategist in 2015, adding that now he's a major liability. Free advice to Carter Page, stay off TV. Page took to TV news shows this week to push back on allegations that he has improper ties to Russia. He often refuses to answer questions. The authority to surveil Page, first reported by the Washington Post on Tuesday, came in August after Page stepped down from the Trump campaign. New York Times reported Wednesday. So I guess originally they're saying the Washington Post had that story about his being surveilled. That Page is caught up in international intrigue doesn't surprise Ian Bremmer, who runs the risk analysis firm Eurasia Group. Page worked with him briefly as a researcher about 16 years ago. He struck me as extremely smart. I think you're the only one. But I came to realize quite quickly pro-Kremlin, Bremmer recalled in an interview last month. In the late 1990s, being pro-Kremlin was not unusual. Even President Bill Clinton had a tight relationship with his Russian then counterpart, Boris Yeltsin. At the time, the Council on Foreign Relations had awarded Page one of its prized international affairs fellowships. The organization confirmed to McClatchy that Page was one of 11 who won the fellowship for the 1998 and 99 year, spending his time in residence at the Council's New York offices. I remember his being an appealing candidate for one of these difficult-to-get fellowships, said a person who sat on the selection committee, who spoke only anonymously because selection is a private matter. What attracted the committee, said the panel member, was Page's assertion that he worked in military intelligence stationed in the Western Sahara. This does not appear in any of Page's personal or professional accounts, but Page confirmed Friday that he worked in Western Morocco as part of a UN peacekeeping mission. At the Naval Academy, Page was a Trident Scholar, a prestigious designation that allowed him to serve as a researcher in his senior year on the House Armed Services Committee. The scholarship put him in the office of Representative Les Aspin, Democrat of Wisconsin, shortly before the congressman became Clinton's defense secretary. Page also said he had served multiple tours in the Middle East and Europe as a surface warfare officer, and that he later worked in the Pentagon on nuclear non-proliferation matters. Page is also a frequent visitor to Moscow. A person who has long known Page said that while living in Moscow, Page dated a Russian ballet dancer, but otherwise rarely shared details of his personal life. This longtime acquaintance was dumbfounded when the generally apolitical Page joined the Trump campaign team and echoed Trump's admiration of Putin. I found the speech in Russia breathtaking in terms of his criticisms of the U.S. and his love affair with Russia, the acquaintance said. Fast forward to January 10th, when the online news site BuzzFeed published the 35-page private intelligence dossier compiled by a former British spy, Christopher Steele. Here we are. It featured unsubstantiated claims of collusion between the Trump campaign team and the Kremlin, and it alleged that Page had met with Igor Sechin, the powerful chief of oil giant Rosneft. The Russian Foreign Ministry dismissed the allegations as crap. Quote, crap. The most explosive allegation about Page, Sechin offered him the right to broker a 19% stake in Rosneft if the Trump administration lifted financial sanctions on Russia. Come on now, we need to move on and look at real issues, Page said when asked about that allegation. The dossier's reference to Page reemerged in news reports after former KGB chief Oleg Erovinkin was found dead in a Moscow alley on December 26th. The first news reports in Russia indicated that he'd been murdered, then were changed to say he had died of a heart attack. Erovinkin was a top aide to Sechin and was believed to be a go-between for his boss and Putin. His death drew attention in the British media late January because the former KGB man fit the description of informant mentioned in Steele's dossier. Page addressed the issue Friday, saying he never met Erovinkin and does not recall ever being in his presence, but perhaps he was at some conference or cocktail party at the same time Page was. Well, more interesting detail emerging about Carter Page. Doesn't quite solve all of our problems here, but anyway, I thought that was an interesting piece that we ought to add to the puzzle. And I guess off in another wing, there's this one. I think it's probably time to make sure we get this on the record as well. Both Salon and The New Yorker have similar pieces about the incident that led to the downfall of Devin Nunes. And I think they're describing the same events here. And I'm going to go with the New Yorker piece by Ryan Litza. Although, let me take a look at the length of the piece, because we are getting towards, that time in the show. The continuing fallout from Trump and Nunes' fake scandal. I think both pieces are aimed at the same thing, but now I'm getting the spinning pinwheel here, so it's going to take us some time to scroll down and see if we can read any of this. What's the holdup here, computer? Anyway, if we don't, all right, here we're going to at least get to scroll down here and see about how long it takes us to get to the point here. Not too long. I think we can squeeze this one in. Hope this makes the point. If not, I'll put it out there. Recently, several members and staffers on the House Intelligence Committee, which is investigating Russia's role in the presidential election, visited the National Security Agency in Fort Meade, Maryland. Inside the enormous black glass headquarters of America's largest spy agency, the congressmen and their aides were shown a binder, of 2 to 3 dozen pages of highly classified intercepts, mostly transcripts of conversations between foreign government officials that took place during the presidential transition. These intercepts were not related to the heart of the committee's Russia investigation. In fact, only one of the documents had anything to do with Russia, according to an official who reviewed them. What the intercepts all had in common is that the people being spied on made references to Donald Trump or to Trump officials. That wasn't even clear, though, from reading the transcripts. The names of any Americans were concealed, or masked, as you've come to learn, the intelligence community's term for redacting references to Americans who are not the legal targets of surveillance when such intelligence reports are distributed to policymakers. The binder of secret documents is at the center of the bizarre scandal created by what may be the most reckless lie President Trump has ever told. On March 4th, he tweeted, "Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my, quote, wires tapped, unquote, in Trump Tower but just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism." The White House made several efforts to justify Trump's claim, including using Devin Nunes, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, as a conduit for the documents, which allegedly offered some substantiation. A former Nunes staffer, now working for the White House, dug up the transcripts and shared them with Nunes. As Bloomberg View reported earlier this month, Susan Rice, Obama's national security advisor, had used a process that allowed her to request that the masked names be revealed to her. Rice had to log her unmasking requests on a White House computer, which is how Trump's aides knew about them. Nunes and the White House presented this as a major scandal. I think the Susan Rice thing is a massive story, Trump told the Times, adding, while offering no evidence, that Rice may have committed a crime. We have, of course, since found out that even Republicans are saying, no, it was perfectly in keeping with her duties. Anyway, let me just finish this up. It is now clear that the scandal was not Rice's normal review of the intelligence reports, but the coordinated effort between the Trump administration and Nunes to sift through classified information and computer logs that recorded Rice's unmasking requests and then leak a highly misleading characterization of those documents, all in an apparent effort to turn Rice, a longtime target of Republicans, into the face of an alleged spying against Trump. It was a series of lies to manufacture a fake scandal. Last week, CNN was the first to report that both Democrats and Republicans who reviewed the Nunes material at the NSA said that the documents provided, quote, no evidence that the Obama administration officials did anything unusual or illegal. I spoke to two other intelligence sources, one who read the entire binder of intercepts and one who was briefed on their contents. There's absolutely nothing there. I'm going to skip forward a little bit here and say we get to this part here. The intelligence source that he also spoke to told me he knows from talking to people in the intelligence community that the White House said, we are going to mobilize to find something to justify the president's tweet that he was being surveilled. They put out an all-points bulletin, a call to sift through the intelligence reports. And they said, we need to find something that justifies the president's crazy tweet about the surveillance at Trump Tower. And I'm telling you, there is no way you can get from what's in those transcripts, which are about as plain vanilla as can be. You can't get there from here, basically, is what they had to say. There's nothing wrong with what she did. It's not proof of anything. It's not even a hint at anything wrong. It is instead a cover story entirely around the intelligence community's now acknowledged role in having to scramble to find anything that could be possibly portrayed as justifying Trump getting way out ahead of himself and way out ahead of everybody who's working with him and just making a reckless, idiotic, baseless accusation. The kind of thing that I guess you could get away with in a tweet as a private citizen because nobody gives a damn. But as President of the United States, accusing people of national security crimes is no small thing. Amazing that the intelligence community then had to swing into action, not monitoring Russia, not monitoring China, not monitoring North Korea or anybody else, but looking for anything that could even remotely be portrayed as evidence that the president wasn't insane. But it didn't work because he is. There's a lot more that we can report on this, including, by the way, an interesting profile on that former Nunes staffer who has moved over to the White House. Lots going on around that guy and lots going on in discussions about him in the top inner circles. Kushner's protecting him. Bannon's protecting him. What is the deal with this guy? Maybe we can deal with that on Friday. Friday makes a good day for all those sorts of reads. In the meantime, we've got to turn the mics over to the guys at the After Show because they have an awful lot to catch up on here today. It's Thank God It's Joe Vidi, Thursday episode of the After Show. Here's what's coming up. A recently released study shows about 51,000 people are injured annually by the police to protect and serve. The Supreme Court orders refunds for people whose criminal convictions are overturned. And the judge who Trump criticized for being Mexican gets selected to determine the fate of a deported dreamer. Perfect.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How's this for synchronicity? On the last half, they'll be reporting that the FBI has been investigating Russia's ties to Trump campaign advisor Carter Page since 2013, even longer than we thought. And Vladimir Putin really doesn't want anyone to mark the revolution part of the Russian Revolution centenary. Coming up next on the After Show.